Hello everyone, welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will be discussing the Hindu Delhi edition dated 19th March 2020. The topics we'll be discussing are displayed on the screen. Time stamping has been provided in the description section. So let's begin. This article from page number 5 titled NDRF puts contingency plan in place. It's an important one. NDRF, National Disaster Response Force, works under the supervision of NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority. It's an important article for the mains exam. In the mains exam syllabus of GS paper 3, there's a topic disaster and disaster management. UPSC has been in the habit of asking the question in the context of guidelines given by NDMA. For instance, in 2017, UPSC asked this question on tsunami. And they were asking, in the light of the guidelines of NDMA, describe the mechanism. Similarly, this question of 2016, UPSC asked this question on cloudburst, but they didn't forget to ask about the guidelines given by NDMA again. So NDMA, being the apex body for disaster management in India, is very important, and anything related to that is also very important. So we are covering this article keeping this in mind. India is presently at the second stage. There are 4 stages of spread of coronavirus. The first stage is when only few cases from outside the border come into the nation. The second stage is when there are sporadic events. Those sporadic events are such that the infection from where it is emanating that can be identified and people can be localized. If need be, they can be quarantined. But at the third stage, it's very difficult to identify the source of infection because it is spreading at community level. There is a community outbreak and it's very difficult to identify the source. If this is not controlled, then the outbreak goes to the 4th stage, and at the 4th stage, it is called as epidemic. When it's epidemic, there is no beginning, there is no end. And it's nearly impossible to control an epidemic if the state machineries are not very active and potent. Presently, India is at the second stage. It's a very crucial time that we have to swing all the state machinery and our potential to stop this so that it doesn't move on to the third stage. What has been done so far? First of all, online visa facility has been suspended for 36 nations. And for the 11 nations, stringent screening is done. There are thermal screening at all land and airports. Containment policy has been developed in every district, and this is crucial to stop the virus outbreak at the second stage. This is headed by district magistrate in all districts. There are institutions like National Institute of Virology, Indian Council of Medical Research, Indian Medical Association Council, who are working day in and day out to include more and more testing facilities and beef up their machineries. Union Health Secretary is coordinating meetings with various stakeholders, including all the states and UTs. Textile Ministry have been working hard to develop protective clothings in case of community outbreak. Coronavirus will cause infections in the respiratory system of people. And then nasal swab pins and ventilators will become crucial medical instruments. So arrangement of these have started to begin. Now let's come to the specifics of National Disaster Management Authority. NDMA has been coordinating with states and district authorities first of all, because although it's a central body, it has to work in coordination with the states and UTs. NDRF, dedicated disaster management force working under the supervision of NDMA, have been sensitized how to deal with the issue. Around 15,000 staffs, they have been trained and kept on standby to follow the protocols when they will be released. Similarly, 5,000 personals in major states and at airports, they have been sensitized, they have been given the personal equipments, and they have been trained to deal in case of community outbreak. The functional body to relief measures, NDRF, working under NDMA. Similarly, the executive body to enforce the policies of NDMA is National Executive Committee. And National Executive Committee is one of the main job is to coordinate with the state and UTs because of the federal political structure of India. There's a very important body outside the aegis of NDMA, and it's important to discuss here. It's called as National Crisis Management Committee. Basically, it's an executive ad hoc body created as and when the need is. And because it's a supra-ministerial body, it does not come under the aegis of any ministry, so it will be easy for you to guess that it will be headed by Cabinet Secretary. They are devising strategy for the outbreak, have held various meetings with secretaries and cabinet secretaries of various states. So that's how NDRF under NDMA have been prepared for any contingency. It's important to talk about NDMA, and I'll give you a basic idea of NDMA that will be important for both prelims and mains examination to understand the organizational structure of this body, because it is very, very important body to be studied under disaster management of GS paper 3. First of all, NDMA is the apex body. All the policies, guidelines flows from NDMA regarding disaster management. It is also a statutory body formed under Disaster Management Act of 2005. It is headed by Prime Minister. Extremely important to remember, and that increases the importance of this body. Prime Minister is the chairman of NDMA. Vice chairman is a cabinet minister. There are other ministers with the status of Minister of State, 8 of them as the member of NDMA. NDMA also has a secretariat, which is headed by a secretary. Could be any secretary of any ministry, but by convention, so far, Secretary to the Ministry of Home Affairs is the Secretary to the Secretariat of NDMA. Secretariat basically maintains continuity. It's a kind of permanent body of bureaucrats under NDMA. NDMA comes under the aegis of Ministry of Home Affairs because disaster management comes under the Ministry of Home Affairs. You have to remember at this point that natural disasters, all disasters other than drought, the nodal ministry for that is Ministry of Home Affairs, but drought as a disaster, that is under the Ministry of Agriculture. The most important mandate of NDMA is to formulate and implement policies regarding disaster management, but they have to coordinate with the state and UTs regarding their implementation. Prime responsibility of disaster management vests with the state government in the Federal Polity of India. And then the other responsibilities and the mandate is to make the provision for the funds for the mitigation measures, and also to carry out the relief measures and set a minimum standard of relief concerning various disasters. They are also mandated to give relief in loan repayment or to disperse new loans concerning disaster management. The executive arm of NDMA is called as National Executive Committee, and it ensures the implementation of policies of disaster management. Again, it will be easy for you to guess that the chairperson of National Executive Committee should be the Home Ministry Secretary. The third body working under the aegis of NDMA, after we have seen its own Secretariat and National Executive Committee, the third one is NDRF, National Disaster Response Force. You have to know that it is constituted under the Disaster Management Act 2005 itself. The Act had the provision for creation of such a body to be working under the supervision of NDMA. And NDMA is a specialized force for disaster response. It's a unique force that India has. There are altogether 12 battalions of paramilitary forces. Paramilitary forces, by the way, are also very important. They are mentioned in the syllabus under internal security. Out of the 12, 3 each comes from BSF and CRPF, and 2 each comes from CISF, ITBP and SSB. And as we have seen earlier, National Crisis Management Committee, this also has a very important role whenever any crisis springs up. For example, hijacking, riot, serial bomb blast, any kind of crisis. This is made on ad hoc basis. It's an executive body. It has nothing to do with National Disaster Management Act. It has nothing to do with National Disaster Management Authority. And it also deals with cases of natural calamity. And since it is not coming under ministry, it would be headed by cabinet secretary. So the long and short of what we have discussed is this. The structure of NDMA is like this. NDMA, the chairman is prime minister, vice chairman is a cabinet minister. After that, there are 8 members. And all of them 8 members have certain responsibilities regarding disasters, and they have the responsibilities to coordinate with certain states and union territories. There are 3 bodies under NDMA. One of them is its own secretariat, the executive body called as National Executive Committee, and the third is NDRF. We'll see them. But now, if I just expand on the role of the members, you would see that each member, for example, let's see this member, has the responsibility concerning cyclone, floods, urban flooding, landslide, coordinate with NIDM, National Institute of Disaster Management, and to create awareness among people and to coordinate with media. This is the responsibility concerning disaster management. Then there are responsibilities to coordinate with states and UTs. For example, this particular member with this particular set of responsibility for disaster management has to coordinate with states and UTs like Delhi, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Punjab, Haryana, Chhattisgarh. Similarly, the role of all 8 members will be defined, which we don't have to get into, but this is for your basic understanding. So the overall picture of disaster management in India looks like this. We started our discussion from here, National Disaster Management. Management Authority. Basically, it has three bodies under its aegis. Its own secretariat to be headed by the Union Secretary to the Home Ministry. There is a body called as National Executive Committee, which is the executive arm of National Disaster Management Authority, and then NDRF, National Disaster Response Force. NDMA comes under the aegis of Ministry of Home Affairs, which coordinate with overall the most important body for disaster management, which is the cabinet. And as there are three stages in the governance, union government, state government, and district government, so are the three layers of disaster management authority. At the apex is National Disaster Management Authority, then there are State Disaster Management Authority, then District Disaster Management Authority. Just like National Executive Council we have seen coordinate with the states, the State Executive Council would coordinate with the districts. There are further levels of disaster management machinery at the municipal level and the panchayat level. So that's the overall picture of disaster management administration in India. The most burning issue in Indian polity presently is the appointment of Justice Ranjan Gogoi to the Rajya Sabha. There are two important news related to this on page number 10. One is the lead article and the other is the editorial article. We'll club both of them and have a common discussion. There is no constitutional provision or any legislation that bars such an appointment. However, this issue has raised two important questions. One is related with the conflict of interest of the executive. Executive is the appointing authority of judges. For example, in this case, nomination and appointment to Rajya Sabha has been done by the executive, and executive simultaneously is also the largest litigant in the court. So this raises the question of conflict of interest for the executive. Apart from that, there is a very important issue of judicial impropriety of the judges. We'll discuss both of them under the larger umbrella of judicial independence, which forms a very important part of mains GS paper 2 syllabus under Constitution and Polity. Here is the snapshot of the discussion that we are going to have. We'll understand the importance of judicial independence, then we'll move on to know the constitutional provisions to safeguard the judicial independence. Then we'll discuss the key issues related with conflict of interest of the executive and judicial impropriety. Then finally, we'll look at some way ahead as to how to safeguard judicial independence in absence of any constitutional provision or legislation that bars the appointment of judges post-retirement. First thing first, what's the importance of judicial independence? Judicial independence is as important as the survival, the existence of our democracy. The way we have formed our governance system, it has three organs: executive, legislature, and judiciary. And the federal political structure has the hierarchy of center, state, and then the local governments. And at the heart and core of everything are citizens. The balance of responsibility and the power of each organ and the stakeholder in democracy is very crucial to maintain a healthy, functional democracy. For example, the balance of power between executive, legislature, and judiciary is important for separation of power and efficient functioning of governance. And that will be ensured only if there is independent judiciary. In the parliamentary form of governance, executive is responsible to legislature. But the extent and the manner in which executive will be responsible to legislature will be decided by constitution and independence of judiciary in case there is any argument or there is unsettled case of the law. Judiciary, Supreme Court, also act as the highest court of appeal. If a state has to appeal against the center, if there is a conflict among state and state, in that case, it's the final verdict of Supreme Court that will prevail. So independence of judiciary and impartial judgment is very important for a healthy federal structure. Similarly, to uphold the fundamental right of citizens, the final authority on that is also again the higher judiciary, and independence of that will check the arbitrary power of the state on the citizens. So it's about the existence, the survival of the state of our democracy. Judicial independence is crucial. Now let's come to the constitutional provisions concerning judicial independence. First and foremost, Article 50, as part of directive principle of a state policy, states that there must be separation of power between judiciary and executive. The mode of appointment of judges come from Article 124(2), and it says that executive cannot appoint the judges without the consultation of judges. And it has been liberally interpreted by the Supreme Court, and that gave rise to the collegium system, in which judges themselves actually appoint judges, and this is considered as the most important provision of the constitution to maintain judicial independence. There is security of tenure for the judges. Judges cannot be removed arbitrarily by the executive before their age of retirement. Then there are provisions related to fixed service conditions. Once a judge is appointed, his service conditions, his salaries, etc. cannot be changed to his disadvantage. Article 124.4 talks about removal of judges, and it is exceedingly difficult to remove judges in India. Article 146 says that expenses of the Supreme Court will be charged from the Consolidated Fund of India and will not be left to the discretion of executive or legislature. Article 124.7 ban on practice after retirement. A retired judge of the Supreme Court are prohibited from pleading or acting in any court or before any authority within the territory of India. Article 129 gives the power to punish for its contempt to the Supreme Court. Article 138 says that the jurisdiction of Supreme Court cannot be curtailed by the Parliament, although it can be expanded. Now we will come to the crucial issue as to what's the big deal in Justice Ranjan Gogoi getting appointed as a member of Rajya Sabha. There are two important issues here. First of all, there's a conflict of interest for the executive. As we have discussed before, executive, the government, is the largest litigant in the court. At the same time, the government is also the appointing authority for the judges post-retirement. So this doesn't seem fair, and in the eyes of the people, there could be a wrong perception of quid pro quo. Secondly, the issue of judicial impropriety. Judicial impropriety means judges will not do anything that will lower the esteem of their office in the eyes of people. Justice should not only be done, it should also seem to be done. The issue is that Justice Ranjan Gogoi, being the master of the roster, has been the allocator of the important cases in the Supreme Court. For example, the judgment on Ram Mandir, Rafale deal, Sabrimala, electoral bond, NRC in Assam, Article 370. They all were given by the bench headed by Justice Ranjan Gogoi. Although this has not been done for the first time, it has been done multiple times before. For example, Justice M. Hidayatullah retired in 1970 and he became Vice President of India in 1979. Similarly, Justice Baharul Islam, he retired in 1983 and in the same year, he became the member of Rajya Sabha. Chief Justice of India at that time, Justice Ranganath Mishra, was elected to the upper house in 1998. So this is not for the first time it's happening. Apart from that, you would remember Justice P. Sathasivam being appointed as the governor of Kerala. So appointment of judges on political posts have been done since the beginning. Appointment of Justice Ranjan Gogoi to the Rajya Sabha has only brought the issue back on the table. So the question is, how do we deal with it? One of the earliest suggestions given by Law Commission in its fourth report back in 1958 was that there should be complete ban on political appointment of judges. But as we see, during the 70s and 80s, appointment of judges on political posts were done. Recently, there was a recommendation by ex-Chief Justice of India, R.M. Lodha, and he has recommended that there should be cooling off period of 6 years. And there is a beautiful reasoning as to why the cooling off period should be 6 years, because the term of any government is of 5 years. After 6 years, the government has to come back in order to do the favor. And anyway, that government will be judged by the people in the general election. So that perception of quid pro quo will not be there. Finally, for the mains exam, you have to know there is a Judicial Ethics Charter called as the Restatement of Value of Judicial Life. This was adopted by Supreme Court in its full court meeting back in 1997 with the objective of serving as a guide of judicial conduct for judges. There are many recommendations. There are actually 16 recommendations which are generic in nature under this. But the most important one, which is open-ended and can be used in the exam, is every judge must at all times be conscious that he is under public gaze and there should be no act or omission by him which is unbecoming of the high office he occupies and the public esteem in which the office is held. That means he should not do anything that will lower the high esteem of his office in the eyes of the people. So that's pretty much what you have to know for the exam perspective, barring the political overtone concerning the news. Important news from page number 10. It has been titled Call Data Being Used to Improve Quality. It's an important article for GS Paper 2, Polity and Governance. The backdrop in which this article has been written is the letter fired by Director of Cellular Operator Association of India to the Telecom Secretary. Cellular Operator Association of India is an association of stakeholders in the telecom sector in India. Actually, is a complaint against continued seeking of voluminous CDR details by the local units of Department of Telecommunication. CDR is Call Data Record. Local units of DOT has been asking for high volumes of CDR details, and this is a matter of concern because this may create a surveillance state and data can be misused. Basically, what we have to discuss in this article are three things. We have to understand what are CDR, what details are given in call data records. We will discuss the legislation and procedure laid down to seek CDRs and what's the stand of the government as to what government is trying to do in seeking voluminous CDR details. First question is, what are CDRs? What are call detail records? CDRs are data produced by service provider that documents the detail of a telephone call or other telecommunication transactions, for example, messages. You need to know the details which are revealed in CDRs. First of all, the number of calls made by the caller, the number to whom the calls are being made, the number of the receiver, and also the date, time, and duration of the call. Through CDR details, phone numbers of the sender and receiver of messages can also be known, and most importantly, the location of the sender and the receiver are known. But you have to remember that the content of the message or the voice call is not available through CDR details. That is done through phone tapping, and that is also legal through the Telegraph Act of India. But however, when the law enforcement agency is seeking CDRs, call detail records, they are not given the content of the telecommunication transaction. This is very crucial piece of information that you have to bear in your mind. Then question number 2 is, who has the legal access to the data and what is the legislation concerning accessing CDRs? First thing you have to know that the rules for accessing the CDR comes from section 419A of Indian Telegraph Rule 1951, which is drawn from Indian Telegraph Act 1885. So this is the legislation for it. And the procedure is that any law enforcement agency, both at the center and state level, for example, CBI, Income Tax Department, intelligence agencies, counter-terrorism agencies like NIA, ATS, Anti-Terrorism Squad, all of them can access CDR. But the procedure is that an officer of the rank of Superintendent of Police, SP, or DCP, Deputy Commissioner of Police, if there is commissionerate system of police in the state, these two are the nodal officers through whom any demand for retrieving CDRs has to be routed. But what happens practically is, suppose a sub-inspector during the course of his investigation needs CDR, then he'll write to the SP and SP will seek the information from the service provider and give it back to the sub-inspector. Now, the most important and question number 3. What's the government stand and what is the explanation of the government for seeking voluminous data on CDRs? The government has asserted that data was only being collected to analyze and improve the quality of telecom services and rule out any form of surveillance. Argument put forward by Department of Telecommunication is that because of the complaints about the quality of services in the country's telecommunication network, because of the increasing number of cases of call drops, echoes, cross connections, etc., DOT is concerned and has developed a software tool using the big data analytics to identify the region of problems so that proper actions can be demanded from the service providers. So for this purpose, actually this is being done. And we have seen before that time stamping for the call record is known through the CDR data. So suppose there are 2 calls between the sender A and the receiver B, and if that call is reconnected within 30 seconds, then that can be considered as a case of call drop. So that kind of analysis will be done through this software tool by the DOT, and that's why huge number of data from the region from where the complaints are being received is required, and that's the justification for seeking such high volumes of data. And it is also emphasized by the government that there is no infringement on privacy of any person, because privacy is a fundamental right, you would be knowing. There is no personal data collected through CDRs, as we have seen that CDR doesn't provide those personal data. So that pretty much summarizes the issue of CDR and the government's stand on it. This article has been taken from page number 11. It's titled, "And Supreme Court Verdict Violative of Minority Rights." This is an important article for our mains exam for both GS paper 2 under Constitution and Polity and GS paper 1 under Society. This article has been written in the context of recent Supreme Court judgment of 2-judge bench that upheld 2 legislations of West Bengal government. Those legislations seek to regulate appointment of teachers in the madrasas. This article has been written by one of the leading legal luminary of our country, Faizan Mustafa, who happens to share my name, or I happen to share his name. And the contention of the article is that the legislation of the West Bengal government and the judgment of the Supreme Court both erodes the autonomy of minority institutions that is guaranteed by the Constitution of India under Article 30. Now, 3 things are here to understand. First, what are the provisions in the legislation that seemingly impinge on the rights of the minority institutions. The second thing to understand, what are the provisions given to the minority institutions under Article 30. And third thing, we will try to understand what is the legal argument put forward by Supreme Court to harmonize the provisions of Article 30 with the provisions of the legislation of the West Bengal government, which the author seemingly is having difficulty to digest. So let's begin. First thing, the provisions of the West Bengal Madrasa Service Commission Act 2008. This basically tries to regulate the appointment of teachers to the madrasa through a government appointed commission that will recommend the names for the recruitment of teachers. And in case those recommendations are not accepted, then the government is empowered to deny grants and even to withdraw recognition and affiliation to such schools and madrasas. Now let's have a look at Article 30 of Indian Constitution. What does it say? This article is right of minorities to establish and administer educational institutions. Basically says that all minorities, whether based on religion or language, you have to remember this, there are two kinds of minorities included in Article 30, religious minority and linguistic minorities. They shall have the right to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. And the state shall not, in granting aid to educational institutions, discriminate against any educational institutions on the ground that it is managed by minority. That's Article 30. Now let's look at it from the other side. There are two contentions put forward by the esteemed author. First is that as per Article 30, the rights of minority institutions to administer is an absolute right, subject only to public order, morality, and health. And hence, regulating the appointment of teachers not falling under any one of these three restrictions impinges on the rights of minority institutions. Further, it's discriminatory. Recently, three-judge bench of Supreme Court in Chandana Das case ruled that Sikh minority institutions of West Bengal had right to appoint teachers. Now, this two-judge bench of Supreme Court has ruled that Muslim minority institutions do not have right to appoint their teachers. That goes against the three-judge bench of Supreme Court. So there are two issues. One, it is discriminatory against Muslim minority institutions. And secondly, a higher judge bench ruling is being overturned by a lower judge bench ruling, which is a dangerous trend. So based upon these reasons, the author is making a compelling argument that this is impinging upon the rights of minority institutions. However, the Chief Justice of India has referred this judgment to a larger bench, and we'll have to wait and watch what will be the final verdict of the Supreme Court. Let's revise everything we have done today from the perspective of prelims examination. I'm going to give you quick pointers that will be important for the coming prelims. In the article of NDRF preparation for coronavirus, we did National Disaster Management Authority. And here are the important quick points that you have to keep in your mind. First of all, it's the apex body of Government of India for disaster management. It is a statutory body formed under Disaster Management Act 2005. Prime Minister of India is the chairperson of NDMA. It has a vice chairman of the status of cabinet minister, and it has 8 other members. You have to remember that it has a secretariat of its own, headed by Secretary to Government of India, but by convention, that secretary is Secretary to Ministry of Home Affairs. NDMA comes under the aegis of Ministry of Home Affairs. In this regard, you also have to remember that disaster management basically is the job of Ministry of Home Affairs. All natural disasters other than drought comes under the aegis of Ministry of Home Affairs, but drought as a disaster comes under the aegis of Ministry of Agriculture. You also have to be aware that a prime responsibility for disaster management vests with state government. That's why coordination of NDMA with the state government and government of UTs is extremely important. NDMA basically has 3 bodies. One is its own secretariat headed by a secretary, mostly the Secretary to Ministry of Home Affairs. Apart from that, it has an executive committee. That executive committee is headed by Union Home Secretary. And this is basically the executive arm of NDMA that tries to implement the policies framed by NDMA, and this is the body that basically coordinates with state government. There is an important force dedicated for disaster management working under the supervision of NDMA called as National Disaster Response Force. And this also have been formed under the provision of Disaster Management Act 2005. This is a specialized force for disaster response. Altogether, it has 12 battalions. This is not very important to remember, but paramilitary forces are also there in the syllabus under internal security. So you have to know that the battalions of NDRF are composed of paramilitary forces. There are 12 of them, 3 each coming from BSF and CRPF, and 2 each coming from CISF, ITBP, and SSB. There is one important body concerning disaster management in India called as National Crisis Management Committee. And this is an ad hoc committee made as and when there is a need for a crisis management. This can be formed in any kind of crisis like hijacking, riot, serial bomb blast, even in case of natural calamity. And since this is not attached to any ministry, it's a supra-ministerial body, so naturally it should be headed by Cabinet Secretary. This is the overall picture of disaster management machinery in India. We talked about NDMA. NDMA has three institutions attached to it, its own secretariat, NDRF, and National Executive Committee. NDMA comes under the aegis of Ministry of Home Affairs, which ultimately is managed by Union Cabinet, which is ultimately the final authority on any issue in India. As the federal structure is divided into three layers of union government, state government, and district administration, so is the structure of disaster management machinery. At the top is NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority. Then we have State Disaster Management Authority, and we have District Disaster Management Authority. Just like National Executive Committee, the main purpose job is to coordinate with the states. Similarly, State Executive Committee coordinates with the district administration. In the article concerning independence of judiciary, what you have to remember for prelims are the constitutional articles safeguarding judicial independence. We saw the list of articles and here they are. Article 50, separation of judiciary from executive. Article 124.2, appointment of judges. Article 124.4, removal of judges. Article 146, expenses of Supreme Court will be charged from Consolidated Fund of India. Article 121, conduct of judges cannot be discussed in Parliament or state legislature. Article 124.7, ban on practice of Supreme Court judge after retirement. Article 129, power to punish for its contempt. And Article 138, the jurisdiction of Supreme Court cannot be curtailed by the Parliament. However, it can be increased. Then we saw the article on call data record. What you have to remember for the prelims exam is simply what information is given by call data record, CDR. You have to remember that CDR gives various information like the number of calls that have been made by a caller, the number to whom the call was made, date, time and duration of the call. It also gives the number of sender and receiver of messages. And international mobile equipment identity is also provided by CDR. However, what it does not give is the content of the message or the voice telecommunication between the sender and the receiver. So it's not the content, but it's the end result of the communication that is happening between the caller and receiver. Extremely important to remember. The law under which CDR data are retrieved by law enforcement agency is Indian Telegraph Act 1885. The Indian Telegraph Rule 1951 have been framed under Indian Telegraph Act 1885 and Section 419A of Indian Telegraph Rule 1951 to be specific gives the power to law enforcement agencies to retrieve CDR data. And finally, what's important from our discussion to remember for the prelims exam is your understanding of Article 30. It gives rights to minority institutions to administer themselves. There are two kinds of minorities talked about in Article 30. One is religious minority and the other is linguistic minority. Now let's solve two questions. The first question is based upon the news on page number 15 that deals with open market operation of RBI. This question is from prelims paper of 2011. It's a very simple question. In the context of Indian economy, open market operation refers to. And the answer is purchase and sale of government securities by RBI, option number C. Open market operation basically is a monetary tool in the hands of RBI to manage liquidity in market in medium terms. You can see this snippet from Prelims Compass regarding open market operation, and for further details and application of open market operation, you can refer to the Prelims Compass of 2020. Question number 2 is regarding the news on page number 14, and if you have read this news, please attempt this question. Consider the following statements with respect to Abel Prize. It is conferred recognizing the achievements in the field of mathematics. It is awarded by International Mathematical Union. The first statement is correct, however, the second statement is incorrect because it is awarded by Norwegian Academy of Science and Letters. So answer would be option number A. With this, we have come to the end of the discussion for today. Let's take up the question. Which of the following ensures judicial independence in India? First, unified judiciary. Second, mode of appointment. Third, removal of judges. Select the correct answer using the code given below. 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 2 and 3, 1, 2 and 3.